In today's episode, we're going to be installing some brand new performance modifications for the GU. We're going to start with a stainless steel snorkel from Kingfab Customs, and then some gauges from JRP's brand new 52mm range.
And so this is a snorkel from Kingfab Customs, and it is designed to utilize some of the factory hull so that you don't have to try and source a new guard. And so this is what it comes with. It comes with the 2 elbows needed, instructions, stencil, hose clamps, pinch weld, and then the snorkel. So let's crack into this and see what it all looks like. So it looks like the first thing we need to do is take out the stock air box and make that hole in there a little bit bigger in order to get the snorkel through. All right, let's do it.
One of the things I've learned from my time working on cars is it's always easier to get stuff out of your way than to try and work around it. So get in, start unbolting, and give yourself some room.
Alright, so next on the agenda is making the inner hole here a little bit bigger for the 4-inch to go through. And in my experience, it's easier to just pull this guard off rather than trying to do it from the inside, because then we can see how big we need to make it and we've got more room to work.
GU guards can be a little bit complicated to remove, so if they're not pulling away freely, chances are you've missed a couple of bolts. Check behind the parker, the door hinge, and the sill. With the guard now out of the way, we're able to access the inner fender, where there's a couple of holes that we're going to have to increase the size of, ready for the 4-inch pipe.
Alright, so the guard's off and I've just gone around here with tin snips and I'm just going to neaten it up with a die grinder. So I got all the holes cut out on the inside here. I'll give you a look at that in a second. I kind of got on a roll and just started doing it without filming, but yeah, in the end I end up using a 4-inch hole saw on the inside. A nifty little trick is if you've got a hole and you need to make bigger with a hole saw, you can actually bolt something across the hole and then drill a hole in that in the center and use that as your arbor hole. Because obviously if there's a hole there, then you got nowhere to put your arbor. And so yeah, you can bolt something to it and then use that to locate your arbor. So that's what I did for the inside. And then I just trimmed up the stencil and put it on there. A good thing about Kingfab is they're pretty happy to help. So you can give them a call if you're not sure on the placement and that. They even say it in the instructions. I was pretty lucky. Matt just said, hey bro, give us a call or send me a message if you're unsure about the placement, and I'll check it out for you. And so I've just sent him a few photos. He's pretty happy with it. So yeah, it's time to mark it out, and then I'll be able to cut it and get this snorkel on. But it is 1:20. So I'm gonna leave it there for tonight, and we'll do it first thing in the morning. So it's the next day and we're getting straight back into it. Matt from King Fab told me that the best way to do this is with an air saw, and so I got a mate to pick one up from Bunnings, and he's brought it out for me. I did find that I had to cut the end off this so that it wasn't protruding too far through the guard, because there's lots of stuff in behind there that you sort of don't want it poking at. But anyway, let's get straight into it. Now that there's nearly nothing holding that on, it's like really hard to do it with the air saw. All it's doing is just bouncing this steel around. And so I'm gonna have to do the last little bit with the grinder. Sorry, Matt, I know you said not to. I think everyone probably has their own technique for cutting out these snorkels, and it probably doesn't consist of one cutting device. So I started with the air saw, and then as soon as things started getting wobbly and chaotic, I just went to my grinder. This guard is pretty sad because it's had that safari snorkel cut in it, and so I'm not overly precious about it. Pinch weld will cover a lot of the edges here, but yeah, I might just go around neaten that up a tad before we go trying to fit the snorkel on. The instructions do say to not go all the way to the line straight away, because that's the maximum you should have to cut out. If you think, when I traced the line, I made a permanent marker. The permanent marker line was about 2 mil thick, and I went inside of the permanent marker, so I've pretty much given it about 2 mil tolerance. And now I'm just going around with the barrel sander just to take all the harsh edges away. And so I'll put the pinch weld on and we'll have a couple of test fits. Once I'm happy, I'll pull the pinch weld back off and then just go around with a paint pen or something just to cover up this bare steel. I don't really care about having bare steel, but it's just that, you know, after a while you will get rust runs from, especially on a white car, from the pinch weld. All right, so I've just been around and we've drilled these holes out for the rivnut size, and I've just been around the snorkel hole just with a white paint pen and touched them up a little bit. And so King Fab supplies 2 stainless steel rivnuts, which is really cool. It's cool to see them including actual stainless. Let's get this snorkel on.
So once we were happy with where the snorkel was sitting, we were able to install the pinch weld, poke the snorkel into the guard, and then it was just a matter of doing up the 10mm bolts on the pillar.
All right, so the snorkel's all on. That looks wicked. It's just, now I've got to do the hard part, which is routing the pipe work in under this guard. It's an absolute dog, if Jonesy's is anything to go by. But Jonesy's didn't come with instructions because it was custom. This is obviously a production item, so I'm hoping it's a little bit easier. We'll see. Fucking have a look at that, mate. So yeah, getting all this mounted up in there is pretty much the drill. It's getting too hard to like show you up in there, so I'm just gonna finish it off and I'll pick you guys back up. If you are in the market for a snorkel, I highly recommend King Fab Customs. They're an Aussie company based in Queensland and they looked after me heaps, especially when I was trying to get the fitment right. I was able to reach out to Matt and he was able to help me out and make sure it was in there properly. So yeah, a massive thanks to King Fab Customs. So the next job on the GU, I need to put a new radiator in because the one in there has a leak at the bottom. And so I've organized one of those from Roadrunner and it has just turned up today. And so while I've got the cooling system apart, I'm also going to be changing my gauges. Now, if you've been watching the GU build from the start, you'll know that it has red arc gauges in it. I've used red arc gauges for a long time, but when I saw these ones from JRP, I reached out to them and asked them if they'd be willing to work with me and send me a couple of these so I can have a play with them. And I'll show you why. Now, these are super high quality and nearly every boost and EGT gauge I've had, whenever it gets wet, it'll start playing up and you know, going nuts. When you open up these gauges, you get a cool little card that you can scan and get instructions and stuff, so that's really cool. The gauges themselves are super, super sleek looking. I first saw these in Tyler's car, and that's when I reached out and asked if they wanted to flick me a couple to have a play with. Next up, we have the Headguard Ultra. I was excited about this one too, because it is water temp, low coolant, and water pressure. If you understand cooling systems, then you'll understand why water pressure is really cool. How they work very, very broadly is your block heats up and that pressurizes your coolant to about 15 PSI. And that's so that your boiling temp is raised and your resistance to overheating is raised. And then as it reaches 15 PSI set by the radiator cap, it will bypass into your overflow and it'll run like that until you turn the car off. As you turn the car off, all your coolant jackets will expand again, creating a vacuum that will then suck the coolant back into the block. So why does that make this cool? Well, if your coolant pressurizes over that 15 PSI, then this will give you an alarm indicating that you've done a head gasket or you've lifted the head because of too much boost or anything like that. And so that's why that is really cool. And then the last one is just your standard oil pressure gauge. And I shouldn't need to explain why that's important. So yeah, the first job is to chuck in this radiator from Roadrunner. I'm gonna do that outside so that I don't get coolant everywhere. and then we'll start getting these gauges in. So Roadrunner to the rescue yet again. God, I spilled coolant on myself, and now the flies won't leave me alone. The next thing we've got to do is get this JRP piece in this coolant hose. I do have spots for sensors, but I want to use the thing that they send because it allows you to get a sensor right at the top of the coolant level, and that's where the low coolant alarm needs to be. So I'm pretty sure once that sensor gets dry, then it'll go off. And so you've just got to cut up your radiator hose and then pop that in the top there. So we'll do that.
It's probably worth mentioning that depending on your car and setup, JRP have some instructions on how this piece should be oriented so that the sensors don't collide. Each gauge comes with a small card with a QR code so you can scan and see the instructions for your gauge at the click of a button.
So that's all three sensors in there, and now I can fill the coolant system back up, and then all I've got to worry about is getting these all wired. So we'll get some coolant in it and bleed it up. So now I'm just gonna run it until the thermostat opens. I've got the heater turned on so that it's circulating through the heater as well. I always like to jack the car up on this side so that this is absolutely the top of the system, especially in the GU because they've got a lot of heater hoses that do a lot of dumb routing. But anyway, we'll wait till this bleeds up. Once it gets to operating temp, we'll pull him in the shed. And so the coolant is all bled up and we've got all the sensors in for the coolant, but we still need to run sensors for the boost, EGT and oil pressure. And so I'm gonna get all that hooked in and then round it up and converge at the grommet over there, and then we'll all feed them into the cab together. So I'll get this old EGT gauge out of the dump pipe and we'll chuck the new one in.
I'm pretty lucky that the GU Patrol comes with a thread from factory in the dump pipe, so it's just a matter of removing my old probe and putting in the new one.
All right, so the EGT probe is in. We've got the water ones here, and then I've got the factory oil pressure sensor, the JRP oil pressure sensor, and then the T for the oil. And then I've got the barb here, which is gonna connect up and tee into our boost lines. Now, when you're doing these oil pressure senders, make sure that you don't have thread tape overhang, because you do not want that going through your oil pressure galleries. It's no joke. So yeah, make sure you're really careful when you're applying your thread tape. Now, it will be different car to car where you tee into these places. Obviously for boost, you want to go in somewhere as close to the cold side as possible. And then oil pressure, you just want to tee into, like, you know, where your factory oil pressure sensor is. And then EGT simple, just chuck it in the dump pipe. But yeah, I'm gonna get all these in and then we can focus on running some wires. I will say also that it's really nice to see a company that adds a brass tee and real hose. Every boost gauge I've had comes with that like see-through straw and a plastic one of these. So nice work JRP for including some actual good barbs and hose.
Back when I installed the front mount intercooler, I tigged up my own custom intake manifold, which meant I could include a thread that I could tee boost into for gauges, so it was just a matter of reusing that. Once all the sensors were in the correct locations, it was just a matter of consolidating all of the cables and running them in some conduit to protect them.
So the good thing is I have all the old lines going through the firewall, and so I can use those to pull the new ones through. So I just tape them up like that. Chuck a little bit of WD on it, and then I'll pull it through from the other side. Just gonna have to excuse the mess. This has been quite a night. So what I'm gonna do is drill a little hole at the back here, and that's gonna be so I can control the gauges. Another cool thing about these gauges is they supply their own pillar cups, whereas most other brands, you've got to get it yourself. And so I'm just getting these gauges mocked up in there like that. I've got the coolant one in the top, and then I'm gonna have boost and EGT, and then oil pressure at the bottom. Alright, so we have all the gauges mounted in there, all the switches on the side so that I can adjust them and whatnot. And now I'm going to link all these buttons in. Another thing about having these JRP gauges, you only actually need to supply power and everything once, and then you can just link them all together with these linking lines. And so I'm just going to double check where they all go. This code scanning thing's so cool. So that is them all nice and neatly wired in. And now I've just got to give them all the sensor signals. So we'll go over to the car and do that. All right, so what I've got to do next is get an illumination signal. Now this stalk here does parkers and then headlights. I drive with my parkers on all the time, and so I don't want it to connect to that one. I want it to connect to full headlights. That's when I want them to dim. And so there's a plug back here, and all I've done is probed it with my multimeter until I find the one that gives me 12 volt when the full headlights are on. And so that is the red one with the green trace. And so now I'm just going to strip that back a little bit and solder my signal wire into it. Well, you know you've been working for a while when the camera goes flat. But anyway, whenever I'm wiring something like this up, I always sit it away like that while I wire it up. Otherwise, you end up making your wires too short and you can't pull it away without having to unplug everything. And so that's how much slack we want. And so I've just poked a bit of mild steel rod up here. I'm going to use that to pull this down. And then it's just a matter of connecting everything up. So that's what we're going to do. So yeah, that's all of the sensors wired up and all of the power and everything wired up. I'm just going to quickly see and make sure they work. Oof. I still need to program them and everything, but you can see they all work, which is awesome. They look unreal too. But yeah, it is 3 o'clock, so I'm going to have to call it a night and come back and tidy this up in the morning. But yeah, you can see all of that is neatly cable tied, and I'll run all these and get the excess down in the kick panel. But yeah, they look wicked. I really, really like the look of them. And you can see that's Parker's, which I use in the daytime. And then when you go to full headlights, they all go to dim mode, which is pretty cool. But yeah, we'll call it a night and I'll see you guys in the morning. So it is the next day and I had a pretty late one last night in the end, getting all that wiring through neatly, but it all looks really good now. I've just got to neaten up all the wiring in here, chuck some cable ties in, and then we might take it for a drive. Alright, so I've had a fair bit of a play with these today and I've got them pretty much set up how I want them. And so we have water temp, water pressure and low coolant. So water temp is around the outside, water pressure is in the middle, and then the low coolant alarm will go off if the sensor in there gets dry. Then we have boost and EGT in this one. So boost is in the middle, EGT is around the outside. And then in the bottom one, we have oil pressure. You can also set up the pre-warning and full warning alarms, which I haven't done yet, but I'm going to. One thing I did notice is I mucked up when I did the dimming feature. So the reason my situation is a bit unique is because I drive around with my parkers on. And so you have a circuit in your car that comes on with the parker when the parkers are on all the way through to high beam. And I didn't want it in that because I drive around with my parkers on permanently. I only wanted it to dim when I go to normal headlights, which is here. And so that's all well and good, except when I go to high beam, obviously it goes to a different circuit again. And so what I'm gonna have to do is either put a diode in the line so that I can also supply voltage to the dimming circuit without it backfeeding to the low beam signal, or I'm pretty sure I can get away with doing a relay. So I'm gonna try that now. And yeah, I'm really, really happy with them. Dead set. If you're in the market for gauges, the JRP 52mm gauges are awesome. I really, really like them and I'm glad I changed. But yeah, let's try out this relay and hopefully I can get that to dim on high beam as well. All right, so I got there in the end with this little schematic. And so I'll show you how this works. And so we've got these two relays here. How it works is high beam and low beam comes down into the supply side of the relay as well as to the switching side of the relay. The other side of the switch in the relay goes to ground, and then there's two other wires that come out and go to the dim signal. So essentially what it's doing is it's using itself to switch itself so that low beam can't backfeed through to high beam and high beam can't backfeed back through to low beam, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'll mount those up neat up in here and we'll make sure these gauges work. We'll just double check that these are working. So that's low beam, high beam, and I can still drive around with my parkers on and have them be normal. Sweet. All right, let's pack this stuff up. All right, so that is the gauges all done. And again, a massive thanks to JRP for looking after me with those. They're awesome. I love them. I think I'm probably going to put them in the GQ as well, to be honest. It's hard to show you the color pre-warm system because the GU just like doesn't get hot. That intercooler and like brand new radiator and everything just like keep it cool as. But yeah, I've got it just set to like 85. It'll start going yellow, then orange, then red. And then the EGTs, I think anything above 450 will start getting yellow, then orange, then red. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I love the look of the gauges. They're so sleek, especially at night when you like when you dim it down and it turns that really nice red color like that. It just looks so freaking cool. Another cool thing that these gauges do is you can see that top one is sort of pulsing yellow. That'll do that until the engine is up to 60 degrees to warn me to just take it easy until the engine is up to operating temperature. And you can see that they're dimmed also because my headlights are on. But yeah, these things rule.